Hello everyone, and welcome to a new mini-series that we're gonna run on this channel. It's inspired by an advent calendar. So let me explain to you how it works. Some of you might know that a couple years ago I started a company called TVG Consult. We're a small design BIM consultancy, and of course working with Revit a lot, we developed some internal tools like many other companies that we use every day, like some plugins for Revit to help automate some tasks and help working or adding like functionality to Revit. And so now in this Christmas time, we thought we would share some of these tools with you. So kind of like an advent calendar, every week we will now share one tool with you and show you how to use it, and we will walk through the code behind it so that if you're interested also in developing custom tools for Revit, you can learn about it and maybe get some inspiration for how to develop those tools yourself. So if you've already looked into automation in Revit, you might know that there's different ways to go about it. We have Dynamo, which is a visual scripting tool. We can connect to the Revit API directly using C#, C++. And there's also a really helpful tool called PyRevit. PyRevit is an open source environment developed and maintained by some amazing genius members of the BIM community. And it lets you execute Python code directly in Revit. So PyRevit is what we use to create our custom PyTVG plugin for Revit and the different tools that we will show you in this series. So let's see what is behind door number 1. So the first tool that we're going to share with you today is around tags. So it's actually 2 in 1. So you get one button for adding tags and one for removing tags. And we'll start with the removing one. So this works on any kind of tags that you can have in the project, like room tags or tags on equipment. And it lets you delete tags from multiple views all at once. So for example, here we have a floor plan with some room tags. So let's say from all of these floor plans, we want to delete the room tags. So how we started is by selecting the views that you want to work with. Then we start our tool and it will ask you what kind of tag you would like to remove. So we go for the room tags in this one and then select. And you get a little pop-up window here that shows you that it works through all of the views and how many tags it deleted. And if we close that now, we can see there's no more room tags in any of these views. And then the opposite is if we want to add tags. So similar, we start first with selecting our views and then clicking our button. So now first we need to select what kind of elements we want to tag. So in this case, we want to work with rooms. And then we need to select which tag family we want it to add. So let's say we want to work with this tag family. And again, here you get a little pop-up showing you updates as it's working through the different views, how many it's found, how many it tagged, and then a completed message. And we have our new room tags now on these rooms. So then now, as a first step, let me show you how to install the PyRevit plugin into Revit. As a first step, you will have to download PyRevit. If you don't have it yet, I can highly recommend it. It comes with a lot of very helpful tools that will make your life a lot easier. So it's very fun to check out all of these different ones. So I'll put a link down in the description box for where you can download PyRevit. And then once you've done that, you go to the GitHub link in the description. So if you follow that GitHub link, you will come to our PyTBG repository. And all you need to do here is download it as a zip file, unzip it, and put it in a folder somewhere on your computer called extensions. And then let me show you how to load that then into your PyRevit. So you click here and then go to settings. And here, add the folder wherever you downloaded this file to. And once you've selected that, click save and reload. And then what should happen after a little bit of time is that you get this tab added here called PyTBG, and you can see our different tools that we have added. And you should be able to start using them right away. So now, if you're interested, we would walk through the code behind them so you can understand how Python works and how maybe you can get to the point where you develop your own custom tools for Revit. So if we go back to our PyTBG repository, we can explore the code a little bit. So this is the tag panel that we were just looking at. And as you can see in here are two folders for both of the buttons we added. And then if we go into that, we see two files. One is just a PNG, just a picture of the icon that we want to be displayed in the Revit user interface. And then the other file is the script. If you never worked with coding before, it can be a little bit intimidating at first. But basically, how you have to think about code is just a list of instructions that you're giving to a computer. And in order to be able to communicate with a computer, you need to speak a special language. In this case, it's Python. And there are some predefined functions that you can use to explain what you want to do to the computer, basically. And some of the most basic ones, which is basically all that we're using in this script, is if statements and for loops. So if statements work around a condition. That could be, for example, if the room is bigger than 5 square meters, if this parameter on the doors is filled out, then we want the computer to do something. If not, we want the computer to do something else. So, and that's basically all that happens. We feed something into a condition, and if the condition is fulfilled, we want one result to happen. If it's not fulfilled, we want something else to happen. And then for loops work similar. So they also work around a condition that tells us how often we want an algorithm to run a certain instruction. So, for example, 5 times we want it to add another row of trees. So for x equals 5, add 1 row of trees to our landscaping. Or for all of the windows we have in our project, add this and this parameter to the window. And it will do it until this condition is no longer fulfilled, and then it will end that command. I think it will make more sense when we look at it in practice. So let's look at what we want to do here. So if you remember, the first step when we used the remove tags button was we selected the views that we wanted to work with. So now then what happens in the code as a first step is we want to make a list of all the elements we selected in the Revit, and we can get them from this command here, Revit get selection. So now selected elements holds all of the elements that were selected when we executed this command. But to be safe, we only want views from that selection. So it could happen that there's all sorts of things selected, right? I made this little diagram. So imagine we have here now a list of everything that was selected when we pushed the button remove tags. We have some views here, but maybe we could also have some elements. We could have a view template. And now we want to make a list of just the views to clean up this selection. So we want to copy over basically these 3 views that were selected. And knowing our commands from before, the if statement and the for loop, we can combine them and say, for all of the elements that we have in this selection, look at each one of them, and if it is a view, copy it over to views. If not, then don't do anything. And if we look at that in the code, we can see here. So for all elements in selected elements, so that was our list that we defined here, if that instance, if instance L is a view, then we add it to this new list called views. And if not, we don't do anything. And this last part is just to make sure that the element is not a view template. So, and then in our next step, we say if we don't have anything in views, then we want to print an error message to the screen saying no views selected in Revit. And our plugin basically ends there. And then as a next step, if you remember, you got a list of all of the different tag categories there are. So you could choose what tag you want to remove. That's when we selected the room tags. So for this here, we basically, we make another array or another list that selects only, that goes through all of the categories that we have in Revit and only selects the tag categories. So room tags, wall tags, any tags that there are in Revit, right? For all kind of categories, there exists tags. So, and then we have this, we just sorted alphabetically, and we have this array, this list of tag categories. But now we need to show that to the user. So for that, we use forms. So that's some predefined interfaces that we can use in PyRevit. And we got those by loading the forms library from PyRevit. That's what we do here in the beginning when we initialize the code. So now in this forms, we have a really nice predefined user interface that basically shows a list and lets you select one or multiple items from that list. And to set up that form correctly, we need to give it different parameters. So one is our list of tag categories. So that's what we want to have displayed, the names. And then we can choose some options here. So we want the user to be allowed to select multiple. And we add a title that shows up at the top of the pop-up window. And then once the remove tags functionality gets executed, you will see that this window pops up. And that's because of this line of code, essentially. And then if the user doesn't select anything, we want it to print on the screen no categories selected and that the script was canceled. So similar to like that breakpoint here before where then no views were selected. So now we have our views that we want to work with and we know what tags the user wants to remove. So now all we need to do is execute in Revit the deletion of the removal of those tags in all of the related views. So if we look at that, it's basically like multiple boxes in each other. So we have our views. So let's say, for example, we have here 4 views selected. Then we have one tag category. So let's say room tags, as in the example that I showed you before. And then in each view, we have multiple elements. So that would be our rooms, yeah? So we have X amount of rooms per view. So for each view, for each tag category, it will go through all of the elements. And if the element category is the same as the tag category, it will delete the element. So how that looks like is we have multiple for loops stacked on top of each other, and in the end an if statement. For all views in view, for all tag name, so all tag categories in the selected tag category, find the elements, and if the element category is the same as the tag category name, then add this element ID to a list of items that we want to delete. So that's basically all that's happening here. And just to have some communication with the user, we added some report lines here. So we report here the view that it's currently working on. So we print out the name of the view, and then we report back how many tags were deleted of that tag category. So we add the tag category name and the number of tags that were deleted. And we do that by basically having a count here, that every time this if command gets executed, the count goes up by 1. So then in the end, when this for loop is closed, we can report back the number of tags that were deleted. And then once all of the for loops are closed, we print our little report that we created. So now that we worked through our remove tag script, let's take a look at how to add tags. So let's think about what we want to do. Again, we want to start with a selection of views, and then we need to let the user choose a category for what elements they want to tag. So we need a form, again, with all of the categories where the user can choose one. And then as a next step, we need to choose a tag family. So what tag we want to add to the elements in those categories. So there again, we need a user input. So we need a form with all of the tag families in the project where the user can then choose one. And then as a last step, we need to take that family and add it to all of the elements in the selected views from the selected category. So similar to before, there are some libraries that we want to have loaded so we can use their functionalities. Basically their predefined instructions. So, and then we start with selecting views. So that's pretty similar to before. From all of the selected elements, we want to select only the views. And if no views are selected, we want the script to end and to feedback to the user that no views were selected. Please go back and select some and run the script again. So then as a next step, what we just talked about is we need all of the model categories. We do that by using a for loop combined with an if statement. So for all of the categories that are in the project, if the category is a model category type, then we want to add it to our list, and then we just sort the list of category names alphabetically to make it a bit easier for the user. And now that list, we can give that to our form, select from list. So we have here our category names, and then as a title, we have select category. And because we only have one category that we want the user to choose, we didn't activate the multiple selection option as we did last time. And if no category is selected, we exit the program again. So now as a next step, we need the user input regarding the annotation family. So for that, we need to make a list of all the tag families, all of the symbols that are loaded in the Revit project. So as first, we make a collection of all elements in the document, so in the Revit project that we have open. And then we want to narrow it down to just family symbols. And then now for all of the elements that are in that collector list, if the category, the family category and the category type is an annotation, then we want to add it to this list called all tags. And if no tags are loaded in the project, we also give an error message to the user saying that we don't have any tag families and that they please need to load them first. But for all of the tag families that we do find, we want to make a nice display for the user showing the family name and the type name so that it gets displaced first the family name and then we have a colon and then the type name. So you know exactly what it is you're dealing with. And we sort that again alphabetically and then create a form where we display our tag names and we have a title here. And again, we use this select from list form for it. And again, we have some built-in security here that if nothing is selected, the program stops. But if something gets selected, we need to look it back up. Now from the family name and type name parameter that we created, we need to look that back up in our families. And if once we find the correct one, that is what we save here as our selected tag symbol. So this is the family we want to use in the end. And this is how that piece of information is stored. And if for some reason it wouldn't be able to find that tag family again, then also we would get an error message here. So now we know our views, we know our category. So from those categories, we can get a list of elements that we want to tag. And we know what tag family we want to add on those elements. And now with those pieces of information, we can execute the transaction. So we can execute that command in Revit. And we have a little bracket where this Revit transaction happens. So it's between this start and this commit line. So for all of our views in our selection, now we want to collect the elements. We reduced it here to just the visible elements that are of this category, selected category. So if you see here, selected category, that is what we defined here in the beginning when we asked the user to choose a category from our list of categories. So then this will collect all of the elements of that category in the different views that we selected. And then as a next step, we just count them. So we have our found count here with the length of visible elements. So the length of this array, which essentially means the number of items that are in this list. And we start our tag count at 0, so none of these elements are tagged right now. So for all of the elements in that list that we made, we want to add a tag to them, right? So we have our selected tag symbol from before. And basically now we need to tell Revit on all of those elements, please add that tag. And in order to execute that, we need to tell it a location on where to add it. And then here we use a new command called else if that we haven't used so far. Basically, almost all families have a base point, so the point where the element got inserted, that is stored as a XYZ coordinate. But some families are also based on a curve, like for example walls. So we want to cover both of these cases. So if the element has a location that is a point, we want to add that location as location. Or otherwise, it can check if it has a curve. And then we want to add that curve as a location. And if it doesn't have a location altogether, we didn't want the code to give out an error, so we'll just add a location on the origin, so 0, 0, 0. That basically means that if for some reason you have an element that is super crooked, instead of breaking the code and returning an error, in this case, we still add a tag, but we put it on the coordinate 0, 0, 0. And then in the end, you will see that there's something weird going on and you can move the tag to wherever you need it to be. So now we know what we want to tag, where we want to tag it, and what tag we want to use. So now we can run our command that will create the tags. So for that, we need to give it a Revit project. So that's our document that we have open. We have the ID of the tag family. We have a view selected where we want to add the tag. And then we have a list of elements that we defined here that we want to add the tag to. And then we have some other options, like for example, here we want the tag to appear horizontal. And last but not least, here our location. And it's pretty nice. So this command works for all tag families that you could have. So we only need to define it once, and it works on room tags, it works on equipment tags, whatever families you want to tag. And every time we run this create command, we also want to add a count. So you know we started here at 0 when we found our elements. And then now when we tag them, we want to add +1 for each of the elements that we tagged. And then in the end, once we've run through all of the elements in all of the views, then we print our report saying the view name, what category we worked with, the tag name and the type name, and then how many of those we found and how many of those we tagged. And last but not least, once we're completely done, we want to print that it's completed now. We've run through all of the views that we wanted to run through. So yeah, as you can see, the logic behind it is all quite simple actually. It's a combination of a lot of if statements and for loops. But I think the hardest part when you start out with coding is sometimes you know what you want to do, but you don't know how exactly you have to write it. So you might not be as familiar with the syntax of it all. So the exact grammar, so to say, of how you have to write your command. And for that, there really are a lot of resources online. That's how most people learn about it. So you look at forums and you Google things, see how other people have solved similar problems. And I have to say also, our lovely ChatGPT and other LLMs are quite helpful when it comes to this kind of stuff. Even with something as niche as the Revit API, I've been really surprised how helpful they are sometimes. So as long as you're able to describe what you want to do in some detail, then our AI helpers can be quite helpful with generating then the syntax that matches what you want to do. But of course, I would always recommend that you read through it also and try to understand what the code says, so that, well, on the one hand, you can always have some hallucination from the LLM. So that's basically things that don't exist or don't work. So you want to be at a point where you can check what is written and you can understand it. And also for in the future, if you want to extend on it and build on it, you might want to be able to do that on your own. So understanding what part happens and so on will be quite helpful. So that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed our first little tool that we shared with you. If this was all very known and repetitive to you already, then don't worry. This is definitely the most simple algorithm, and the tools will get more complex as we go along. And we haven't decided what our fourth tool is going to be yet. So if you have ideas and wishes for something that you would like to see in Revit that's broadly applicable to a lot of use cases, then feel free to comment down below and maybe we can see what we can make happen. Otherwise, stay tuned for the next episode. And then I wish you a lovely Christmas time or a lovely day whenever you watch this. And see you soon. Bye bye.